Good morning, and thank you for your patience as we navigate virtual world today. So I invite you to enter into this sacred space with me, recognizing that it's all sacred space. And by choosing to consciously be here now with us this Sunday morning, we're establishing a field of love, a field of pure awareness. And it's from that field of awareness that all thought arises. And for this brief time together, I'm going to invite you not to so much focus on the thoughts that might lead us down a path of logic or belief, but focus more on the awareness out of which the thoughts arise. An awareness that is calm and peaceful, an awareness that is loving and joy-filled. And so as we let go of the dream that each one of us inhabits, we can step into a space that is beyond the dream. And then we can live in the I am, which is the name of God. So what if this I am that we all share is breathing us right now? And this I am that we are doesn't project into the future when it will be a more evolved I am. This I am that we all share does not hang out in the past with regrets and what ifs. This I am that we all share lives in the eternal now. And so by its very nature, it was never born and it never dies. And that's what we are. So the invitation is always to rest as that. We might call this the way of rest. To rest in being. To rest in suchness. To rest in the breath that breathes us. It's so painfully simple, yet so profoundly deep, that this breath that breathes us has freely been given by the universe. And by our willingness to attend to the breath, we are practicing the art of stopping. Stop planning. Stop analyzing. Stop regretting. Stop wanting. Stop rejecting. Stop resisting. Stop expecting. Stop telling stories about X, Y, Z. This radical stopping invites us to discover what is always there. And get radically curious about that. What is always here? I hear that little voice within my heart saying, it's the peace that passeth all understanding that's always here. A peace that's always there. Even when there's chaos in the world, I can go to the eye of the storm and discover that peace never went anywhere. The more deeply I rest in this spaciousness, I discover that love is there. A profound love. The joie de vivre, the joy of life itself. So now I experience joy. A natural joy that isn't happy one moment and unhappy the next, but is the joie de vivre, the joy of being here now, breathing consciously, wanting nothing, and yet opening to everything. I invite you to enter into the heart space. The spiritual heart is on the right side. symbolically, whereas our physical heart would be on the left side. So this month we're exploring the wise heart, the sacred heart, the heart of the beloved, the heart that meets itself in the world, in everyone and everything. And so as we make that heart connection, first with our own self, we then can make it with the world. Perhaps you have a child that opens your heart, or you have a pet that opens your heart, or you have a friend who you dearly love, and when you're with them, your heart just naturally opens. So we're comfortable in this heart space. We don't have to create a narrative about it. We can just rest in this sacred heart. I'm going to read to you an invocation from a beautiful book called The Heart on Fire. And this is how the author starts the book. And I invite you to take this into your heart. Where he writes, O sacred heart within, O sacred heart which is all around, the home of joy, peace, and love, speak to me now. Render me willing. May we be receptive. May we be humble enough to hear your words, even in the silence. May we be strong enough to live your light, even in these dark times. May we meet your gaze in all things, so that we might bless them and join them in your sacred heart of hearts. And in this space, may we follow the compass of the heart together. Place your hands over your heart, and if you're willing to consider that as an option for you, just imagine through the divine imagination what your life would look like if you were receptive and ready to be the sacred heart unfolding in the world. When you're ready, open your eyes. And then live in curiosity, a profound curiosity. How would life look like if I became the lover? If I became the peacemaker? If I became the joyful one? Last week I talked about the spiritual warriors that Margaret Wheatley speaks about, which I consider all of us here at the center. And she says you can always tell a spiritual warrior, the ones that we need on the planet right now, because they have a cheerful disposition. They can actually laugh at things. You know, they can realize how insane some of this is. The beloved Ruth Bader Ginsburg made a transition on Rosh Hashanah. I think it's so appropriate. And I've been watching retrospectives of her, and they have her giving the eulogy at Anthony Scalia's funeral, where these two people that lived on two sides of the belief systems had the best of friendship. And so they came together and they said, wonderful friends can have crazy ideas. And as she was saying that, there was laughter that was rippling out at his memorial service. So what if a spiritual warrior like a Ruth Bader Ginsburg knew how to have a sense of humor when it was necessary? She knew how to put her face down on a chocolate plate and really have fun, like this little baby over here did. Because there's no right or wrong when you're living in that playfulness of life. One of the ones that comes to mind when I think of the spiritual warrior with that childlike sense of humor is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And when I saw him at the Parliament of the World Religions in 1993 in Chicago, he was the final speaker. And he was speaking about the problems on the planet. And he says overpopulation is a serious problem that we have on the planet. And he had a little Tibetan accent, and so he says, in my tradition, I think solution is we need more monks and we need more nuns. And then of course everybody laughed, and obviously that's not going to happen. So you identify them with their playful, innocent, almost childlike humor. And then the spiritual war operates in a field of compassion. They have an open-hearted awareness with the suffering. So they're the ones that pick up the child that's suffering. They're the ones that recognize that they're all our children. They have that compassionate heart. And they operate, according to Margaret Wheatley, with a disciplined consciousness. They're choosing what they choose to think and how they choose to operate because they realize consciousness is causative. They're very devoted. They're dedicated to their practice. I think of Nelson Mandela as a spiritual warrior who was dedicated to bringing reconciliation in South Africa. You know, these spiritual warriors like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was dedicated to equality for all beings. It wasn't just women that she wanted equality for men as well. I guess one of her first court cases was to defend a man whose wife had died in childbirth, and he wanted to stay home and take care of the baby and receive Social Security to do that. And she fought for his right to stay home with a child, saying that men should have the same rights as women. Boy, that's a spiritual warrior. And the last quality that these spiritual warriors have is they recognize there's a necessity for community. John Lewis was a spiritual warrior. He recognized that we need to come together and stand up for Black lives because all lives matter, but Black lives matter as well. So he was an organizer, says we need to come together for a greater vision on this planet. So the spiritual heart is a big something that will lead us and guide us on this journey. Since I am speaking about the wise heart, and Gloryji said that since she had the stroke, she's been listening to a lot of Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta, and I started listening to Nisargadatta yesterday. It was absolutely beautiful when he says, all we are is awareness itself. And he says, when we get caught up in the illusion of me, then we talk about the past and the future and the dream that we've created. And he says, at this stage of evolution, the only thought that any of us needs, I love it when they get down to only one thought that you need, Nisargadatta, is that simple thought, I am, I exist. And then in that I amness couldn't go anywhere. Even when we shuffle off this mortal coil, the I am is still going to be there. So I wanted to see what Ramana Maharshi, in my library of 9 million books, I don't need any more million, but I probably would take them. I found this book called The Garland of the Guru Sayings, the sayings of Ramana Maharshi. And I started strolling through these old books of mine, and he talks about what the heart is. And I thought you would like to hear from the Master what the heart is. He said, the true heart is indefinable as a this or as a that is, as it were. The mirror within all things appear in this heart. The mere I am, it's the same thing with Nisargadatta, the mere I am in all caps, is the self-shining being that we are. It's pure awareness, spaciousness supreme, perfect wholeness, and primal stillness. Now this is the heart space that we're invited to follow, as if it were a compass guiding us. And so when we're in a world that's rather fractured right now, I'm married to a man who worries an awful lot, I realize that the greatest gift that I can offer him is my peaceful heart. When he wants to freak out and stress and obsess over Supreme Court decisions and this and elections and fraud, and I can offer him my peaceful place, knowing that in some strange sort of crazy way we will survive this thing. So he says, this is Ramana, he says, the heart, with a capital H, the heart womb is the beginning. It's the middle and it's the end of all things. The womb of the heart. That's W-O-M-B, not R-O-O-M. The womb of the heart, this firmament supreme within all of us and outside all of us is formlessness. It is only true being in its bright awareness. So he's inviting us to get curious, to stretch our imagination. Could we know ourselves in this sacred heart? And I'm going to tell you a story at the end of this talk today about a love affair between a man and an octopus who met in this sacred heart. So when you hear this, Serena, think of them meeting in this sacred heart. They're not meeting in the human versus the animal. They're meeting in the sacred heart of the beloved. Finally, Ramana says, mind's disillusion in the self, the ocean of awareness, this, when the mind dissolves in this ocean of awareness, is peace eternal. I give you my peace. You want that peace? Peace is already there. this peace eternal. We're asking you to stretch out of me, out of the local mind into the non-local mind, or what Ernest Holmes would call the universal mind. When the local mind dissolves into the self, into this ocean of awareness, peace eternal is found. The heart's vast spaciousness and the love-filled ocean of bliss supreme is the true I am. Love's ocean of bliss is the true I am. I was talking to Jake earlier about the yantras of the world religion, these symbols, and my favorite one is the winged heart, the Sufi symbol of Sufism, and Sufism is the path of the heart. And it's very interesting when Rumi speaks of the heart, he says, all swimming in the ocean of love ends in drowning. Wow, now that sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? All swimming in the ocean of love ends in drowning. So what drowns? Just the perception of me as an identity that's separate from the ocean of love. And then what is born is this love that we all share. Wow. So could we, as we did in that invocation, invoke that love from the Sacred Heart and let it flower within us, maybe as a cause. In this series, I'm using this book. It's about an 800-page book called The Wise Heart as the launching pad for this series. And in this, Jack Kornfield, this enlightened Buddhist teacher, he has a chapter called The Compass of the Heart. And that's what we're talking about today, to allow something to guide us. A compass is something that guides you on this journey. And then when you realize, if you get to be as old as I am, there is no destination for this journey. The journey is the purpose of this life. To journey consciously, to journey attentively. Someone said, I think it was Margaret Wheatley. No, it was Mary Oliver, that beautiful poet. She says, at this stage of my personal evolution, I realize my only job, my only task is to attend to the moment, to be fully present. And so when a little child would come and they'd reach up to you, the moment is saying, this child needs to be held. Am I going to question it, or am I just going to open to that moment and attend to that moment? So could we be attentive, not only to the moments within ourselves, but within our friends, within our family, within our community, and offer what we are. Offer that beautiful presence of love. Not with the idea that I'm going to fix it, but with the idea that I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to hold your hand, I'm going to sit next to you, I'm going to listen deeply when something in you is crying out, and I'm going to hear what isn't being said, in spite of it, in addition to what is being said. So here's how he talks about this compass of the heart. He says, setting a long-term intention is like setting the compass of our hearts. Now he talks about the power of intention, and he says there are short-term intentions and there are long-term intentions. Now the short-term intentions are here to help us get through the moment. So one of my short-term intentions is to consciously breathe. When I get fractured and I get upset, I just say breathe. And in that breathing, there is a stopping. Or I might, short-term intention, just stop. Stop the fretting. Stop the over-analyzing. Stop the trying to want to understand. Some things you just can't understand. So short-term intention, stop, breathe, be. So is one of my short-term intentions. I live in the so of life. So when something unpleasant happens, in Buddhism they call it shempa, something that triggers you. Something that triggers you. Somebody cuts you off, somebody yells at you, somebody tailgates you, and then they honk their horn, and then they speed past you, and they flip you off. Short-term intention, so they must be having a difficult day. So breathe. So stop. Simple intention to help navigate moment to moment. But he says a long-term intention would be setting the compass of your heart. So what if the long-term intention here at the center would be to empower people to awaken to their true nature? A long-term intention would be to just love everyone with equanimity. That doesn't mean I just love the ones that I love, but I can love the Antony Scalias if I'm a Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I can love those that I disagree with. I have two neighbors. On one side, there's a big Trump sign out. On the other side, there's a Biden sign. And I realize I'm the bridge in between those two signs. You know, someone's saying, can't we get along? We're all in this together. You know, I honor your way, I honor your way, but I'm going to find my own way. So set the long-term intention as the compass of the heart. And he goes on to say, he quotes Nelson Mandela as one of his examples. He quotes a lot of other people here, Michael Jordan, Yo-Yo Ma, Mary Oliver. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, let's throw her in there. And he says, these overarching dedications have set the compass of their life, regardless of outer conditions. They give us direction and meaning through their example. You know, we teach by example. So who are the examples in your life that are showing you the way? In the Chinook Indian tribe, they have a beautiful prayer, and they pray to all creation, but they'll say to the mountain, teach me and show me the way. They'll say to the tree, teach me and show me the way. They'll say to the little octopus in the water, teach me and show me the way. They'll say to the bird in the sky. This morning in my beautiful garden, Trey, we had several hummingbirds at the Salvia guarnetica. And Trey said, because it was a cold, chilly morning, he says they must be drinking up all the nectar they can so they can fly south. So little hummingbird, teach me and show me the way, the fragilest of little birds that has the courage to stop her wings in midair and look at me in the window and thank me for growing a salvia outside so she can drink and fill herself up with nectar. He says, he talks to Wendell Berry, and he said, if we are serious about peace, and some people, they set their compass to be for peace, he says, then we must work for it as ardently, seriously, continuously, and carefully and bravely as we would also prepare for war. So he says, if you're going to set your compass for something, do it from love, and do it because of how it makes you feel, who it makes you be, instead of what the outcome is. Even I was reading in Self-Reliance, Ralph Waldo Emerson was talking about prayer, and he says prayer that evokes a specific outcome is, what is the word he used? Vicious prayer. He says prayer is not here to affect an outcome. And then Emerson said, prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life with a jubilant and beholden soul. And he says, and when we know that this God presence is alive in us, that is enough. It's not about affecting a certain outcome. So what if we could live in this wise, sacred heart and be the true self, be the sacred heart, and let it guide us in setting an intention of service in the world. How might I serve? And the world will show you. It will show you how we can serve in a greater way. First connect with the source, and then ask, how might I bring my gift? Each one of us has a different gift into the world in service to this something that's greater. You know, we have this sign over here that says Serving the One, which was a theme for a year, maybe 20 years ago. I think it was the first year we moved into the center here. And I loved it so much I never wanted it taken off the wall. Because what if that's all we're doing? We're serving the One. When I studied with the Sufis, Llewellyn Bounley, he said, it's not about you. It's never been about you. It's about God. And he says, when you serve God, God will serve you. You know, and it was like a whole different way of thinking for me. What if we're here to serve the one in the many, and the many in the one? That's panentheism. That's what we teach here at the center. That everything is God, that God's within us, and we're within God. Nisargadatta, or no, it was Ramana Maharshi said, he says the big mistake is to think that the body is within you. He says you're within the body. We're within the body of God. The biggest mistake is to think the heart was within you. Yes, you have a physical heart, but we're within the sacred heart of the one that begins to know itself. And when you can have relationships, intimate relationships with life itself, you know, it's nice to have the couple thing, but what if you have it with flowers and with birds and with dogs and with kitty cats and, you know, mother of butterflies over here? You realize it's all the same life and it's all the same heart, and it's coming together to experience intimacy with itself. So Serena Sage, who's here today, texted me this week, and she said, David, I saw the most amazing documentary movie / whatever on Netflix, and it's called My Octopus Teacher. And she texted me then the next day, have you had a chance to look at it? And I hadn't had. So yesterday I took a break from what I was doing, and I sat down and I went on Netflix and I Googled up the octopus, My Octopus Teacher. And I was blown away with a love story. That's a true love story. And it started off with a man rather desperate. He had been raised as a child in South Africa, and I was privileged to be at the Parliament of the World Religions in 1999 at Cape Town, South Africa, right in the southernmost tip of Africa. He was raised at the very tippy point where the land meets the ocean, and great crashes of waves and rocks, and kelp forests that are just huge under the water. And he says that's where he found himself as a little boy growing up. Well, later, being that he's lives in South Africa. He moved to the Kalahari Desert, and he spent 20 years in the Kalahari Desert, and he's a photographer. He takes photographs of nature. And while he was there, it was very hard for him to be away from his homeland, which was the water, and now he's in the desert. And two bushmen who were trackers would lead him every day, and they could read the language of the desert floor. And they took him through, and he discovered lions and tigers and all kinds of wildlife that he would never have found. And what he realized from these two trackers was they weren't separate from nature. They had actually tuned into nature. And so they taught him by example of how maybe he could be in the world. So he said, with the inspiration of the call to go back to the sea, because his family was having difficulties, so at maybe age 40, he did a pilgrimage, he left California, he left the Kalahari Desert, and he went down to back to the roots where his water was, took his family there, and he took the curiosity of those trackers and said, I too want to explore, maybe diving into the water just like they did in the desert, and see if I can read the language and the mystery that's there within the kelp forests. So in his quest, in his compass of the heart took him there. He found a place, and he says, the kelp forests are everywhere, and they're huge and big things. I saw them in California, these things that grow, it's like forest under the water. And he said that as he would dive, he says, usually the water's very murky, you can't see, but there was one cove where the water was crystal clear, maybe the size of this room. And he decided, this will be the cove that I investigate. And he didn't use an aqualung, he didn't use a wetsuit. He wanted to go as intimate and as connected as he could with just a little bathing suit on. And he says, and when you went into the water, it was frigid cold. And it took you a while before you could adjust. He says, but once I adjusted to this cold, cold water, he said, I began to ache for it. It's as if he was returning home to this call of the deep, calling unto deep. And so as he was going with his camera down through the coral reefs with all the little fish there, he saw this thing that he had never seen before. It was all in bright colors of blue and coral and orange and yellow, and it was like this ball of shells that was sitting on the floor of the ocean. And he's looking at this ball of shells saying, I've never seen anything quite like this. And in an instant, boom, the shells burst, and this octopus starts to move. And so he's following this octopus through the water, and she goes down into her den. And he'd never seen it. And then she lifts her head up and she looks at him with her one eye, and then she goes back into the den. And then she looks with the next eye. And so this was maybe day one. He kept going back every day. Day 1, 2, 3, 4. I wrote down the days because it was kind of fun. On day 26, she came out of her den and she looked at him and she reached her tentacle out and she touched his finger. And then, 80% of her cognitive awareness is within her tentacles. And he said this million-year evolved being was connecting with me, and she was stroking his finger with her tentacle. And they were having this relationship. And so he couldn't believe that here I am meeting this creature on day 26. He went down every single day. She was still afraid of him because, all around her were what they call the pajama sharks, and they feed off of the octopus. So she had to stay well hidden and camouflaged and be a smart little octopus if she was to survive in a world where the sharks were all around her. And so she was very smart, she was very clever. And so she, on day 52, remember day 26, it was another 26 days later, she came out of her den and she started to follow him. And she started to follow him in the water. And what he said, I knew she was saying to me, he said, I started to begin to think like an octopus. She was saying, I trust you. I trust you. And so as he was going around with his camera, he dropped the camera, scared the little girl, and she flew and went into her den. And he went, oh, I screwed it up. I was just getting trust. I dropped the camera, and now she ran away. And so he said, remembering the wisdom of the trackers, I learned to track her. So I went down the floor of the ocean, and here's where she had a little meal abalone. And then I noticed that when she would take the mollusk out of the shell, that she had this ability within her to drill a little hole into the thing around the shell, that she had intelligence in order to extract the whatever snail from the shell. And so she had this intelligence, and he gathered all these little remnants of her hunting. And after a while, it was day 102. Took another 48 days for her to let go of her fear. On day 102, she came out, and she she went up to him, and he said she lay on my chest. You could see her literally crawling on his chest. She was getting intimate with him. And he said, in his little comments, he said, I'm falling in love with an octopus. He said, I'm dreaming about an octopus. Every day he went back, and this intimacy of these two species coming together. So on day 108, he saw her foraging, and she showed him how to hunt, how she hunted, and she would use him in her hunting. She was just the smartest little being, and she was showing him, this is how I do it life. You show me, it's show and tell. And the next thing you know, one of the sharks, one of the pajama sharks, followed her back to her den, and they followed the scent of smell. And no matter how she tried to escape him, the shark was down in the den, shoving. And it was very painful. Trey had to leave the living room at this stage. He couldn't handle it because the shark, when it smelled it, it grabbed onto one of the tentacles, and the shark started to do this twirl, this twirling. And Trey ran out of the room. I can't watch it. Well, I watched it. The shark took off the tentacle and went swimming back with this long tentacle in its mouth. So the next day, day 109, he went down there to her den, and she was very weak. She was white and pale, and he decided, I'm going to feed you. He found a little clam, and he opened the clam, and he tried to feed it. I don't think it did much good, but it made me feel better that I was trying to help her survive. He went back every single day. By day 130, he noticed that there was a new tentacle growing. I didn't know they could regrow the tentacles, but next thing you knew, she had a tentacle again. So by day 150, she's swimming, he's there, she's on his chest. They're having this beautiful love affair that went on and on and on. It was day, it was day 200 that the sharks again found her. And this time she was a little bit more savvy. She was running, and she was quite an escape artist, but the shark wasn't going to let go. So she went into the kelp. And so she started to wrap herself in the leaves of kelp. And so the shark started attacking the leaves, and she was smart enough to flee the leaves of kelp, and she went down to the floor of the ocean. And she did how he met her in the first place. All of a sudden, she took like 50 shells, and she covered herself in shells, blue ones, orange ones, yellow ones. She was a ball of shell on the floor of the ocean. And the shark went down there, could see that she was in there, but she couldn't get her mouth over the little octopus. So then little Missy, who by this stage was pretty smart, she decided to ride on the back of the shark. And she hooked onto that little fin, and that shark's going all around, and she hears this ball of shell just riding along like Humphrey in a stroller. She said, you're going to exhaust yourself, and I'm going to be freeze because I'm smarter than you, and you just better know that. And so there she is riding on the back, and he's videotaping it, and he'd be so out of breath because he didn't have a tank. He'd have to go up and get a gasp of air and then come back down as he's journeying this way with her. So she beat the shark at her own game. It was day 250 that he came down to the water, and he noticed that there was a very large octopus lying next to her den. And he thought, oh my goodness. And she's found herself a beau. And so they bred, I guess. And she was with baby octopus. And she was in her den, and he says she didn't come out of the den. And she stayed in that den, and she stayed in that den. Her gestation period, I don't know what it was. And he says something like 1,000 little babies were born of this one little female octopus. And he says, and when the babies were born, he said she was too weak to leave her den. She had exhausted herself. And it was day 304 that he had known her, and in her weakness, finally one of the pajama sharks came and took her fragile little body. And he recognized that she had fought for life as long as she had. And he came back to the cove. She was no longer there in form, but he brought his little 10-year-old son, and the 10-year-old son said, Dad, look what I have. Here was a little tiny baby version of this octopus in his head. And he was crazy enough to say, there you are. You didn't leave me, you came back. Thinking that this maybe was one of her children. So I turned off the Netflix movie with tears coming down my face, and I said to Serena, I said, I need an octopus in my life. I just think I just fell in love with something so incredibly, mysteriously beautiful. So what if this man, by just following his heart, went back day after day after day to have a relationship with something that isn't as complicated as a human love, but is as sacred as any form of love, whatever, to show us kind of the way to navigate in this life? And so I asked myself, what did this teach her? And he reflects, what did she teach me? And he says, she taught me that we're all connected, that we're all one. In the first talk of this series, I talked about the chord of the heart. And when the chord of the heart is struck, we move from me to we, that we're all in this together, that we're all each other. And as Jesus said, if you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. So what if in this crazy little story, we actually get to experience the oneness on this planet? Something as seemingly insignificant as an octopus. I'm going to have a hard time eating calamari from now on, but that's the way it is. In his little book of the soul, Mark Nepo talks about living with wholehearted awareness. And this is how he phrased it. I thought it was really relevant. He says, the work of remaining wholehearted in this world depends on the honest acceptance of all our gifts and all our failings. We don't want to be dualistic and say, I only like David when he's perfect and flawless. I love it when he has his flaws and his vulnerability and his weaknesses and his struggles. He says, difficult as this may be to understand, we can only access compassion by being whole, which means not denying the difficult or stubborn parts of who we are. We all have reaction. We all have Shempa. So there's a line in the Bible that says, could my perfect love my own imperfect? Could we love those parts of ourselves that we feel are less than skillful? And he says, and when spacious enough to be a home for our full humanity, two treasures within us will open up. He says, first, we're allowed to experience the full miracle of life. It was Jake out there that's walking who asked me if I believed in miracles. And he says, when we get into this open heart space, we experience firstly the miracle of life. Life is a miracle. And then he said, and the second one is, we're allowed to experience the full miracle, again, that word miracle, of love. Now, what I witnessed with that little octopus was the miracle of love. For all of you who are seeking Mr. Right or Miss Right or Mr. Wrong or whatever, watch the octopus thing and it'll blow your mind. He says, this commitment to wholeness, with a capital W, works on a societal level as well. And we need to move into the we. We need to, the necessity of community. We need to heal our planet. It's wonderful to heal ourselves, but we need to heal one another as our own self. So he says, a wholehearted community is one that doesn't deny its flaws or shortcomings, but works toward an honest acceptance of both its strengths and its failed attempts in living up to its own values. And when a community is spacious enough to be a home for all its citizens, then the frail and the stubborn alike, the healthy society emerges. Could we be there for those who are struggling, who are filled with anxiety, and offer our spaciousness, our love, our heart, our peace, our deep acceptance, our realization that they're part of the wholeness as well, that we're all part of each other. We're teaching this wonderful class on Tuesday mornings or Wednesday mornings, and one of the inspiring teachers made a similar suggestion, not to follow the compass of the heart, but he says to let joy be your compass, to find out what brings you joy in life. Something as simple as that. What brings me joy is to tend flowers. I love to put bulbs in pots and watch them grow. I put some hyacinths in these water bottles in the window in the kitchen, and just the other day I noticed the roots are coming down. And so I went to change the water and the bulb fell into the thing, and I had to forgive myself for making a mistake. And then the bulb kept falling into the thing and it wouldn't sit up where it was sitting before. And so I said, little bulb, I'll take care of you. And I found some little toothpicks and I put the toothpicks in the bulb and I set it on top and I put fresh water in, and the bulb said, thank you. You see, they even want to be picked up and loved. So what if it's all this connection to our own self, even in the smallest of things? It's not complicated. I shared with you about the golden garden spider that we had on the gate for about 2 weeks. All of a sudden she disappeared. I found her, she's found a new home. She's living in the compost heap among the fragrant honeysuckle. Lonicera fragrantissima. Isn't that a sexy word? Lonicera, honeysuckle, fragrantissima means the most fragrant. And it's an ancient old Lonicera fragrantissima, and there she is right at the top with her web. And she's got that thing in the middle, and she's waiting for her spouse to come, not unlike the little octopus, but in her case, he's going to die and she's going to live. He's going to sacrifice. It's nature. What am I going to say? And when you watch it and you make a sense of reverence for it, there's room for all of this in God's kingdom and her queendom, if you will. So let me do a quick closing meditation, because I'm so full of this intoxicating love that I'm actually making love to spiders and octopus. It says octopuses? Octopi. Okay. It's the one life, the one heart, the one presence awakening within us that would have us lose our mind to find the no mind that Eckhart Tolle speaks about. That infinite awareness that precedes all thinking. And it exists within an octopus, it exists within a spider, it exists within a tree and a hummingbird. This intelligence that is greater than just a human intellect that wants to understand things logically. It has a deep intuitive knowing and an ability to navigate and protect themselves in ways that we can't begin to understand as humans, but we can feel into it, a sense of belonging to an I am that we all share, an infinite intelligence, a divine imagination that can navigate troubled times like that little octopus did with the shark. We can navigate these troubled times of this pandemic. You know, pandemic also comes from the root word pandemonium, or panic. So even the very name kind of instills in us a sense of panic, or pandemonium, chaos. But when we realize it's just a word, then we can go underneath the panic, or the pandemonium, or the pandemic, and find that stillness, that peace, that love, that connection to the breath, that sense of belonging to life itself, knowing that it's waiting for us to come home to ourselves, to this peace that passeth all understanding. As Paul said in the book of Philippians, let it guard our mind and let it guard our heart, this peace. And so I invite you to just breathe in that peace. Attend to the peace. Feel how spacious it is. And inside that peace is divine love. A love for all creation. A love for the uncreated. A love for the journey. A love for the present moment. All arising in the breath. Feel that spiritual warrior within you, the one that has a sense of humor, that one who's compassionate, that one who is disciplined in thought and action, that one who is dedicated and devoted to something greater than just the local self, dedicated to peace, to harmony, to equality. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, to equality for all beings. And a recognition of the necessity of community, that we need one another to walk each other home. And so in this place of the spiritual warrior, claiming our rightful place, put your hands over your heart, if you will, in prayer fashion, and let's say to this spiritual warrior within us and all around us, I honor you.
I honor you.
I respect you.
I respect you.
I love you.
I love you.
You are the deepest aspect of myself.
You are the deepest aspect of myself.
The beloved in me
The beloved in me
bows to the beloved in you.
bows to the beloved in you.
And in this place we are one.
And in this place we are one.
So accessing that sacred heart that knows no other, I invite you to open your hands and to let that presence just radiate out from you as you, knowing that it is resonating in this whole world And you are an octopus right now, with your arms, with your tentacles, embracing the one life on its heart, and your heart are one. Is that crazy? How sweet it is. Thanks for sending in your ties out there. Maybe we'll see you in satsang on Wednesday night. Let Glory know if you want to join us. Or if you're interested in class on Wednesday morning, Jody Rutenberg is the connection. Mwah.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.